Buckeye Nation talks all the time about winning national championships, and that's the goal and the standard each and every year. Well, for the first time in 6 years, they are at the precipice. Ohio State Buckeyes live coming your way just 5 days before the national championship game. We've got Tony Gerdeman on the line from Buckeye Scoop and Steve Hillwagon. There he is from 247 Sports Bucknuts. Guys, how we doing this week? We better be doing well.
Yeah, big week.
Big week. This is it. This is something else. Even at Ohio State, where it's, okay, we should be accustomed to this. We should be used to this. We should not be overwhelmed by this. This is still really, really special. And so, Steve, we're going to start with you in regards to the kind of the vibe or the magnitude that you're getting from all of this.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ohio State's had a lot of close calls in recent years when you think about everything that's happened. And they got back to the championship in this star-crossed crazy season here in 2020-21. And they have an opportunity to upset Alabama, a full touchdown favorite here in the championship game, to win the national championship. Ohio State hasn't played for the championship since winning it in 2014. It's been somewhat of a closed shop with Alabama and Clemson kind of trading it back and forth. LSU obviously broke in last year with Joe Burrow, a one-off, as the kids like to say. Hadn't seen him before and probably won't see him again for a while. But, I think that Ohio State's win over Clemson is so big from a perception standpoint that people had basically just looked at it as Alabama or Clemson every year, as they were the top two programs in college football. And now Ohio State's kind of pushed its way back up onto that top line again. They've been recruiting at such a high level that this was inevitable at some point that they were going to get back up there into the championship game. And for it to have happened in a year as crazy as this one, where they only got to play 6 games before they played their playoff game, as opposed to 11 for Clemson, was kind of crazy. But they went in and dominated Clemson. I think we all saw the game, obviously. A few of us were there live, and it was an impressive showing, no question, and left no doubt. Whereas last year, Clemson kind of got past Ohio State in a controversial finish. There was no controversy this year. It was Ohio State all the way. And yet, you go from the frying pan right into the fire. There's one more. You just scaled a very tall mountain, and you look up, and there's an even taller one standing right in front of you that you got to get to the other side to realize the national championship. And I'm sure we're going to talk quite a bit about that. But Ohio State back on the forefront of college football and reunited, and it feels so good.
Tony, the magnitude of this one is enormous. And you know my deal. I try to stay neutral, try to stay unbiased. It's impossible. I disclaim that all the time. It's impossible, but we do our best. And when you look at Alabama and Ohio State on the marquee from the standpoint of what's going on right now currently in college football in the landscape, and I know Clemson would be right there and actually surpassing Ohio State until just a few days ago. But if you take the current with the historic and put it all together, I don't think it gets any better than this.
No, I would agree with you as well. And the reason, in my opinion, the Clemson win was so big is because it has been a top 3 of Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, with Ohio State being the clear, I think, number 3 in that grouping. And yet, if you look at the game last year, where they were clearly better than Clemson but lost that game, and then this year clearly better than Clemson and dominated and won the game, you could make the argument that Ohio State has leapfrogged over Clemson and become 1 and 2 with Alabama. And now they have the opportunity to leapfrog Alabama and go to the head of the line. And so for that reason, the Clemson game was huge. Now you have this opportunity to not only win a national championship, oh, by the way, but then also declare yourself the top program in the country. Then you have to, of course, defend it. And I think we all realized, like last year, LSU was, because of Joe Burrow, Joe Brady, and a weak SEC. Let's just face it. But now you've got an Ohio State program that is under new leadership, under new management, Ryan Day in 2 years has taken them right back where Urban Meyer did, and he's done it, a year earlier, and at least getting them to this point a year earlier than Urban Meyer did. So, give even beyond Ohio State and Alabama, just give everybody nationally credit for getting through this year. And Ryan Day has always said, whoever handles this situation, this pandemic, the best will come out the better for it. The team that wins it all will have handled it best. And I don't know that Ohio State has handled it best, but they sure have had a lot to handle, and they've handled it a lot. But maybe just getting through it as best they can, having players step up, that's as important as simply eliminating the virus, because different schools have done it different ways. But if you've got enough guys to step up and fill roles, then that is another way of handling it better than anybody else.
Not that he requires an introduction, but we're joined by Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove on Rivals. Kevin, great to see you. And for anybody that's ever late on the guest panel, unless they've excused themselves, you can always blame me. I get the link out there way too late, and I should have been on the ball. So Kevin's joining us a few minutes late. My bad. But Kevin, we're basically just taking initial thoughts on the magnitude of this one.
Yeah, it's a huge one. I mean, it's one that we're going to be talking about for a long time. Fans will be talking about even longer. 3,000 people who were supposedly in attendance for this game. I guarantee you within 12 months, there'll be about 75,000 Ohio State fans that would say that they were there to see this game, this win against Clemson, finally breaking through against the Tigers. A lot of demons were exercised in this one. I think it felt good for Ohio State fans. I'm never truly a lot of kumbaya on message board culture, but there was some kumbaya afterwards. People were happy the way that Ohio State was able to answer the adversity. Clemson comes out on its first drive, marches down the field, just really kind of does what it wants to do to the Ohio State defense. Ohio State forces a 3-and-out. Clemson then on its next drive scores as well. So I think a lot of people are saying, well, this is going to be one of these outscore them type of games. If we can stop them 50% of the time, maybe we'll be able to figure something out. And then Ohio State shuts them down for quite some time, the rest of the half, at that matter. And when the Ohio State defense is working and the Ohio State offense is working, it's a very scary team. And we can sit there not to get too far ahead of ourselves and start talking about the Alabama game, but people are already kind of trying to liken this to 2002, 2003, that Miami team that they had to take on. But, a very different type of situation. But, this Sugar Bowl game really checked off a lot of boxes. I think was really a coming out party for a lot of players. And for just how many weeks and weeks and weeks we heard that what's wrong with Justin Fields, even with probably hamburger meat for ribs for half of that game, he came out and had himself a hell of a game.
Kevin, we'll stay with you because that's where I was going next. We'll try to balance the time between the Clemson victory and the Alabama game with only one show between games. I don't go to hyperbole. The term heroic comes to mind in a sports sense. I think it certainly was that. I'm not going to put it on some kind of magnitude that's beyond sports, but from a sports standpoint, Kevin, we'll start with you, go to Steve, go to Tony. Justin Fields, that was a performance for the ages.
Yeah, Michael Jordan had the flu and had to score 55. He didn't take a helmet to the guts the way that Justin Fields did, and throws for a Ohio State bowl record 6 touchdowns. I mean, he was torquing his body and making 60-yard throws. The long touchdown to Chris Olave, the long touchdown to Jamison Williams. And for as well as the Ohio State offensive line played and everything, it wasn't like Fields was completely untouched after that point. He did kind of have a moment or two where Clemson defender or 3 got a hand on him. So it really was a heroic performance for what he was able to do. I've had a lot of people come up to me and be like, oh, he's milking it, or, that kid, if it's not one thing, it's something else. Go ahead and take a helmet from James Skalski in the guts, and and tell me what you think about that type of situation. It's one of those quarterback performances that's going to live forever at Ohio State, especially because we went so many years without those types of quarterback performances, as it was placeholder handing it off to placeholder handing it off to placeholder.
My turn. Yeah, I think you have to give him credit for being very courageous and being a tremendous leader. I was in the end zone in the first row of the stands taking photos, was my location. And he took that hit, and it was a heavy hit. I mean, it hurt, and he did leave the game for one play. And it was so reminiscent, obviously, of Sean Wade having the targeting penalty against Trevor Lawrence the year before. And Skowski, who actually had a targeting penalty in their loss to LSU in the championship game, he was sent out again. In this instance, Fields went out for one play. They handed off. C.J. Stroud came in and he handed off. And then Fields jogged back onto the field, but he was very ginger. He was just kind of hobbling as he came back on the field. And I was looking straight at the referee, the white hat from the Big 12, and he looked him in the eye and said, "Are you okay?" And wanted to make sure that Fields was okay physically. And here's Fields, barely able to jog onto the field. Well, not only was he okay, he took the snap and rolled out and threw a perfect touchdown pass. I mean, it was uncanny and then he went to the medical tent. And as we understand, got a shot. Quick examination by the trainers and the doctors over there, was deemed okay to continue playing, and went on and just had this amazing game. And he needed to have a big game, guys, because he had not played well against Northwestern without Chris Olave, and he needed to have a great showing. His pro stock, his NFL stock could have slipped a notch or two. I saw one projection from USA Today. Now him behind the BYU quarterback down at like number 4 going to Atlanta or something along those lines. So, which for him, being a Georgia kid, that'd be probably a dream come true if he's able to lead his home state team to some big things down the line. But, first things first, back here at Ohio State, 385 yards, 6 touchdowns, 43 yards rushing. He did not run the ball a whole lot after that injury, and that's a big question for this game coming up. He wasn't able to run the ball last year in the loss to Clemson. Will he be able to run the ball all this year against Alabama? And that'll be an important part of their offense if he's able to do it. So I'm interested to see where this goes from here. Obviously, there'll be a lot of people watching him in warmups. That's the next chance you're going to get to see him on a football field, because they're going to have everything else on lockdown the rest of the way. Certainly, they're not going to show you much of anything. If he's even able to practice, we don't even know. Coach Day said he's definitely going to play, but, to what degree and how well remains to be seen.
Well, since Kevin threw some shade at my guy Michael Jordan, me being a Chicago fan, I'll throw some back at the Dodger fan, Kevin Noon. Yes, would I compare this to 1988 Kirk Gibson getting injured, pulling a groin, stepping out of his walk-in tub probably, and then coming in to face Dennis Eckersley and hitting a meatball home run.
Ring.
Cheap home run against a worthless pitcher like Dennis Eckersley. No, I think this was a little bit more impressive what Justin Fields did. It's funny because Tom Orr and I were talking about this, my partner on my podcast. Is this the greatest individual performance in Ohio State history? And the thing is, we were saying the same thing about Trey Sermon the game before, where he rushed for 331 yards and was the single biggest reason why Ohio State won that game. And then for Justin Fields to do what he did, while he was definitely hurt, the thing that keeps going through my mind is after the game, when he got onto the Zoom call with reporters and sits down in his chair, he is like, ouch. He's like, speaking the pain, like, he's verbalizing all of the things that hurt as he's sitting down, and then doing the same thing as he's getting up. We all saw him on the exercise bike on the sideline trying to get on it and showing this grimace of pain. It was the same thing after the game, finally talking to reporters. And yeah, there was no milking it, because we all saw the hit. It looked pretty serious to me. And if you want to go ahead and milk it, go ahead. But I don't think it was. And then to go on and just throw the ball so well. The one interception, Ryan Day said it was his fault, not Justin Fields. He said we should have been running the ball there. And, I think his hand got hit or something and the ball fluttered. But I don't recall a better Michigan or a better quarterback performance. It's up there with like the Troy Smith Michigan performance of maybe like 2004, where he just did everything for the Buckeyes. But I think this is better because, the circumstances, the doubt that so many people had following that Northwestern game, myself included, because that game, spooked me. It's like, well, where did this come from? We've never seen this before. How easily can Clemson replicate this kind of defensive performance? Because if Northwestern can do it, surely almost anybody else can do it. But from the get-go, he was calm and he was accurate, and he was regardless of what happens against Alabama, I think he's cemented himself as Ohio State's greatest quarterback of all time again.
A lot of people owe Northwestern an apology. That game had more to do with Northwestern than Ohio State not being a good team. And of course, a different team to a certain extent shows up every day, the Luke Holtz comment. But with all due respect to Trey Sermon, and in some respects, I think he actually played as well or better in this game against Clemson than he did against Northwestern. I thought that the yardage was tougher gained. He was running mad. He was running with an attitude, but both efforts by him were exceptional. But how many other guys in the nation could have taken Trey Sermon's spot and did similar damage versus, for as great as Trevor Lawrence is, Justin Fields might be the only collegiate quarterback on the planet who could have pulled off that performance. It could be argued. That said, we'll start with Steve. Do we have any inclination? Of course, there are not injury reports. We don't have the information readily available to us. It's so much speculation. But how prepared he's going to be from a health standpoint with the ribs to face Alabama?
Well, obviously, Coach Day is not going to give you a diagnosis of where things are at. He was asked 3 or 4 different times very pointedly on his call Monday about that. Fields himself was supposed to appear on the call, but didn't. I think we're supposed to still get him maybe tomorrow, I guess, on a media call. But the issue to me is what can he stand? What can he abide in terms of pain as he gets into this? And how limited is his mobility and his range because of it? Is he able to have full motion and range and be able to do all the crazy different things that he can do when he's healthy? And if he can't, then that limits what Ohio State can do offensively, in my mind, if he's not completely 100%. On our site, we had a report that it sounds like he's going to be okay. There was no structural damage, no broken rib, so to speak. So that's good, but it's still painful. Bruised ribs are no fun. Any of us who've had them. I've never had a broken rib, thank God. But I know just breathing can sometimes be a tough task, even with bruised ribs. So, I just think that he's going to try and tough it out. I mean, that's been his MO throughout all this. And so that's all you can hope for with this kid. And again, you don't want him to put himself in harm's way and endanger his long-term health or safety or anything. At the same time, nobody wants this more than he does. And so wild horses aren't going to keep him away from that field on Monday. And he's going to do everything he can to lead his team to one more victory in a championship that would etch their place in Ohio State and college football lore forever. So Ryan Day, a few weeks back, started coining this phrase that, it's got the potential to be one of the greatest stories in the history of college football. And I don't even think at the time he understood the magnitude of where this thing was headed or what it could turn out to be. But man, he seems awfully prophetic right now. They are 160-minute football game away from, being considered, again, one of the most amazing feats in college football history, to go from not having a season in September to winning the national championship, quite possibly, if they could somehow upset Alabama. And again, we've lived through this before where it was a foregone conclusion. It's a done deal. Miami was supposed to beat Ohio State like a drum back in 2003. Alabama was supposed to roll up Ohio State and its backup quarterback Cardale Jones in 2015, and neither of those things happened. And I don't know that this is necessarily a vintage Alabama team, offense and defense. They got a great offense, but I think their defense is a little susceptible. And again, can Justin Fields exploit some of that? So again, interested in getting into that and seeing which way it goes.
Yeah, we remember last year what a limited Justin Field looked like coming down the stretch. He laid on the field against Penn State and Michigan, and we were looking at which brace he was wearing. Was it the heavy brace? Was it the cloth brace? Whatever the hell a cloth brace is. And then he trots out for the Clemson game with the heavy brace on, and we know that Justin the runner is not going to be there. So we've seen what a limited Fields looks like. We saw him in the game, probably on, with whatever shot they gave him or whatnot, being able to throw the ball 50, 60 yards or whatnot. And we're hearing that he's fine, but, fine and great and perfect are all, very, very different shades of gray at that point. You wonder what type of running element he's going to have, because I don't care how great your defense is. A mobile quarterback is always a bit of an equalizer in terms of the equation and whatnot. I can't imagine that they would put Fields out there in harm's way, since the drop-off between number 1 and number 2 in the quarterback depth chart is so great, because Ohio State, based on only having 7 games, based on just the weirdness of the schedule, never got any reps for any of the young guys. No reps, really. I think C.J. Stroud has less than 20. Jack Miller has less than 10. It's not a great situation there, but you do have to have enough of that threat. But, when you have Trey Sermon running the ball so well, they have a nice little back there with Mayan Williams, by the way. Let me tell you that. He's fun to watch. And, whether or not Master Teague is able to go due to, with whatever's going on with his health concerns, as long as Mayan Williams can hang on to the ball, I want to see him get a couple of carries, not at the point of taking away valuable carries away from Trey Sermon. But I think that that's somewhere that you try to make up maybe some of the lost offense by not putting Justin Fields in those types of situations. You have him go on plays to where he's getting to that sideline and he's able to step out of bounds, because, I'm not going to insinuate that Alabama would hit him extra hard or in a certain position, but you play to win the game, and you can play within the whistle and play hard and play physical without playing dirty. And if I know an opponent is a little bit vulnerable, you go for that if you're trying to win a national championship. This isn't some meaningless exhibition. So many games along the way are, but this one, the winner hoists the big leg lamp trophy. So you do whatever you can to win.
It's a major award. But I think even with Justin Fields, when he runs, to avoid contact, he'll slide down, but even that's going to be painful, like depending on, which side he slides on, because, he was hit in the back, and if he's sliding on his hip and his hip was hurting, and then it changes your thinking, do I slide on my right hip instead? And then you're moving the ball around as you're getting hit, and, maybe there's some fumble issues there as well, although once you start the slide, you're not supposed to be hit anymore, so the ball should be safe at that point. But I still think he's going to take off when he needs to. This is the last game. This is his last game in college football, more than likely. And so there's no reason to the minutes don't carry over anymore. You're not going to take any of it to the locker room. You're going to leave it all out there, and so far he's shown the willingness to do that. I think he's frustrated by the fact that you get to this point and he's not 100%, just as he wasn't against Clemson last year. And you wonder if he's thought to himself, like, I could have done more last year, but maybe I chose not to. And then you get into the whole aspect of injury versus being hurt. And if he's just, if he's just feeling pain, if he's just hurting, then maybe it becomes a mental thing where it's like it doesn't exist. Whereas injuries exist. This, bruises and whatnot, he can get over that. Pain is temporary, that sort of thing, just the machismo of it. And does that get him through the tough yards? The, 3rd and 7, and he takes off and picks up 8 and dives for that last yard rather than sliding. There are going to be instances like that where he may get up slowly, and he may get up so slowly at some point Ohio State has to call a timeout just to get him, a breather and then get them back to going. But it will be interesting to see what Alabama does when they can get a chance to. Is there a 15-yard late hit? Is there a penalty for taking him to the ground and then landing on him, where it's almost a good hit, but then you land on him to squeeze a little bit of life out of him, and it's just 15 yards, and I don't know that it's dirty. It's just guys hitting quarterbacks, and wouldn't be surprised to see Ohio State do the same thing, just because this is one of those games where every single play could decide the game. And as long as you're going to hit the quarterback and the quarterback is going to have the ball, you're not going to let up. You're not going to try to, well, I don't want to get a penalty. You're not worried about the penalty. You're trying to kill that guy in a figurative sense. And if the ball comes flying out or you get penalized, then, that's kind of the breaks, and it could go great for you or it could go bad for you, but you don't know that at 100 miles per hour.
The line play in favor of Ohio State on both sides of the ball against Clemson was overwhelming. Last year, it was decided. I don't think anyone who knows anything about football could watch that game and not say that Ohio State wasn't the superior team offensively and defensively in the trenches, that it was a decided difference. But it was even more egregious this time around. Tyreek Smith, Tommy Togiai, do we know their status for sure?
No, I don't think anybody knows for sure, and Ohio State isn't going to give you anything until about an hour before the game about who is and isn't going to be there. Maybe some things will come out on social media, or one of those guys will put out a sad face emoji and say I didn't get to make this trip or something like that. Or in the case of last week, Harry Miller's mom came out on Facebook and announced that her son had it. And that was a public declaration that he wasn't going to play. And I don't know if we'll see that or not. I think that this is just part of what football in 2020, this season has been all about, that Ohio State fans have been conditioned, beginning with about the Michigan State game, that anywhere from 2 to 4 of the starters are going to miss the game. And the good news is, with the last game, Chris Olave missed it, but was able to come back for the Clemson game and played a starring role. Zach Harrison missed this last game against Clemson, and you hope, if the timing is right, he's able to get back and play against Alabama, and what kind of an impact he might be able to have. So, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. It would be a tremendous blow to be without Togiai, who's been such an impact guy. Tyreek Smith, who's starting to get to the quarterback with a little bit more regularity. It would be a tremendous blow to be without him as well. I just look at it and just say, well, hey, the next guy has got to play. And some of those guys that we haven't seen quite as much, they're going to have to step up if that's what it is. And we just have to accept the result for whatever it is. It doesn't seem like anybody's inclined to postpone this game over a few positive tests. And I just think that it's looking more and more like it's going to be on Monday. And that's just the way it's going to be, the way it's got to be. So they just got to make the best of it, in my mind. And it is what it is. It's the year 2020. Nothing's perfect. And it's chance of a lifetime for these kids to play in a championship game, and very unfortunate to have to deal without it.
Well, the college football playoff has come out with their low bars of, you need 53 players and 1 quarterback and 4 defensive linemen, and Ohio State has upwards of 20 defensive linemen on the roster. And so when there are reports about an entire position being decimated, like if you include the walk-ons, it's almost impossible to get down to 4 defensive linemen. And so, we've all seen the names, but I don't see things getting so bad there that they can't play, just because Ohio State recruits a bunch of defensive linemen, and they've got a bunch. And now there are some who aren't healthy, and that has taken a hit as well. But I don't see unless they go with the contact tracing thing, where it's like that. You know what? Then you wipe everybody out and say we can't do this. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like the college football playoff is interested in Ohio State's problems. I'm sure Alabama isn't either, and they'd have to get, I guess, considerably worse in order for this to be something that will be addressed. And as long for defensive linemen, it's just so few as a bottom line that it's kind of ridiculous. But since Alabama plays a 3-4, I guess it's okay for them. But Ohio State playing a 4-3, and they'll have to figure things out. Not that they'll get down that low, but that's the bar is very low in terms of the minimums that are out there. Like one quarterback is the as long as you've got a quarterback, you're supposed to be out there. And it's like, well, that will be fun if you're down to one quarterback and then you lose that quarterback, as Texas did against Alabama way back, 2009 or 2000, whenever it was. They lost Colt McCoy and had to go with Garrett Gilbert or whatever. At least he was a quarterback. What happens when Ohio State or Alabama would have to put in, well, I wouldn't mind seeing Devontae Smith at quarterback. Sure, go ahead.
Well, we could go back to a certain Alamo Bowl or whatever, where Ohio State had to go Wildcat the whole way because they didn't want to burn red shirts or whatnot. So, not to say we haven't seen this in, a different light, but I mean, getting down to 4 defensive linemen would be scary, obviously. Tony's absolutely right. What the definition of contact tracing is, where those dates are, what's going on with all of that. You need to see guys like Antoine Jackson, Jerron Cage, Teron Vincent step up at defensive tackle. If Steve had mentioned, if Zach Harrison is back for this game, that would be important. Somebody like Jean-Baptiste. You have some young guys. I mean, we saw early in the season, we saw Ty Hamilton play. Going up against a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line for Alabama, going for the best offensive line unit in the nation. It's going to be a challenge, but spoiler alert: Ohio State wasn't going to shut Alabama out. And while it would be nice to slow them down, you're going to need some service breaks out there. You certainly would prefer to have them scoring in 9 and 10 play drives than 2 play drives, but. It's kind of a next man up, and honestly, Ohio State's going to win this game by putting more points up on the board, not by holding Alabama down to 17. That's just not realistic in my opinion, unless I have an absolutely wrong read on this game. And trust me, I'm sitting here 36 minutes into this show ready for Mark to ask me a prediction, and I have no earthly idea at this point. So I'm kind of, if I look distracted, it's because I'm just trying to flip a coin.
Kevin goes first.
No, hell no.
Well, Tony, at least Kevin and Steve have a little buffer from last week. You got to make up for your wrong prediction. Did they pick Ohio State? They've got a postseason win in the win column, both of them.
Well, here's the thing about that, though. I have never picked an Ohio State CFP game correctly, so I don't know that anybody wants me to pick Ohio State in this one, so we can discuss it later. But I think 20-17 sounds good. I don't care what Kevin says.
You are legitimately like 0 and what would it be, 7 or something like that?
0-4, like what, Ohio State's 4 playoff games.
Okay, they got 4 other playoff, now 5.
Well, then
we've got the 2 from 14. They get the 2 Clemson games, the 3 Clemson games after that. So we're up to 5.
Loss win is for Ohio State. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have not yet correctly predicted an Ohio State playoff game.
Nice work, Tony. People are flocking to Buckeye Scoop as we speak.
They're not there for my prediction ability or my ability to write or my ability to podcast, all right?
It does amaze me what a overrated skill that is by a lot of people that watch these sorts of things and read that they think that predictions mean that you know something or don't know something, that you have legitimate knowledge of. Although
back in 2014, it was just kind of a shtick at that point because I picked against them to get with Wisconsin, so I just let it ride. I knew all along they were going to beat Alabama and Oregon. I mean, who didn't? Sure. Kevin, don't roll your eyes. Sure. Next subject.
No comment.
Next subject would be, well, we hit all the highlights, the big names and the headliners from the Clemson game, but we went into that game questioning the secondary. We'll start with Steve in regards to any questions answered. I think this is for as good as Clemson is. Number 1 pick in the NFL draft, pulling the trigger. The wide receivers are good, but they're a rung or two below what they've had there at Clemson in the past several years. Whether we feel more confident about defending this Alabama passing offense.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. Ohio State did give up 400 yards passing to Trevor Lawrence, although some of that has to be with a grain of salt. They were trailing 35-14 at halftime and were not able to establish the run either with Lawrence or Travis Etienne, whereas last year Lawrence did get loose for some big running plays as the quarterback. Etienne either year ended up in like the 30-yard range both years against Ohio State, whereas he had routinely gone over 100 yards most opponents. And so Ohio State again showed that they're not going to give up a lot of rushing yards. And can they contain Najee Harris running the football? That's going to be the first question, first matter of order for them. But the secondary, to my way of thinking, did okay. I mean, were there a couple breaks here and there? Yes. But it was spread out over the course of the game, and they didn't give up a, quote, big play. And they made Clemson earn everything that they got going up and down the field. It was 10, 12 play drives for 75 yards or whatever it was. It was not a three or 4 play drive type thing. So to me, I think they did fine. Sean Wade, did he get turned upside down a couple times there by Cornell Powell from Clemson? Yes, he most assuredly did. But on a couple of those instances, he was playing soft coverage off the receiver because they wanted to keep the play in front of them and not allow anybody to get behind him. And maybe that's not his best strategy or best technique. So to me, Marcus Williamson's going to be critical. If they line up Devontae Smith in the slot, it would seem like Marcus Williamson would be checking him more times than not because he's more the slot corner. But I think Seven Banks, it's going to take a village. Seven Banks, Sean Wade, they're all going to be up against him at some point. In the safeties, and again, it depends. Are they going to go to more of a nickel look and pull a linebacker or a lineman, or are they going to try and win with 3 corners and 1 safety? I guess we'll have to check and see how they're going to do that. Alabama's offense, this is probably one of the best offenses they've ever had in school history. And I saw Greg McElroy was on one of the shows, and he was joking, we won a lot of 2017 games when we won the national championship, that kind of thing. He said, if you want an explosive offense, those are fun to watch, but, we were just as effective type thing, winning with defense and running the football and those kind of things. So it is a little bit of a departure from what we've seen from Nick Saban in Alabama to be so over the top. And Devontae Smith has numbers that would like make Michael Thomas in his prime a couple years ago very vengeful of those numbers because, he had well over 1,000 yards receiving, like 20 touchdowns. He was the clear Heisman Trophy winner. I don't think anybody else was even really in this picture. He was the best player in college football this year, and he's going to get his. I don't get the sense of the feeling that they've got anybody else who is right there with him. And that's where Ohio State's offense may, have somewhat of an edge because they can throw it to Olave, they can throw it to Wilson, and they can also, throw to the tight ends. And now Jamison Williams, welcome to the party in week 8 or whatever it was. So, I think it's going to be a great challenge for Ohio State against Devontae Smith. And Marcus Williamson, has earned some respect, I think, this year as a 5th-year senior, first-year starter. And, can he match up in this game? It's going to take a lot of help, I think, from a lot of people to keep Smith in check.
Alabama won the national championship over Texas at the Rose Bowl in 2009 with Greg McElroy going 6 for 11 for 58 yards.
There you go.
The game has changed.
it's like a century later. Here we are.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. And in terms of the Ohio State secondary, I think what impressed me most is the long gain was like 29 yards, and the fact that they gave up no big shots like that, and that's good for them. That's something that they have not specialized in this season. Can they do it again? I'd be shocked. If they do that again, they win. If they keep Alabama with 0 30-yard receptions or more, I don't see how Ohio State loses this game, because that means they will have pretty much contained Devontae Smith, didn't give up, and Mechie, and I don't think Jalen Waddle is going to play. He's practicing, but like if they contain all of those guys and no little dump off for 45 yards to Najee Harris, like if they keep everything in front of them, then that would be a good sign. Now, is Alabama going to run the ball 50 times and just, get 5 yards, 6 yards of crack? And Ohio State pretty much, it will just get worn down. But the secondary, I'm not totally convinced yet, just because Clemson's receivers aren't that great, and the best receiver is a slot guy, and that, that's what it is. And Alabama has more talent than that. They have a better running threat. Ohio State can defend the run with pretty much 3 guys, and that's a bit of an exaggeration, but not too much of one. Whereas now against Alabama, they'll need to commit more guys to stop the run, leaving fewer guys in the secondary. So this will be obviously their biggest test, and this possible Shaun Wade Devontae Smith matchup, or Shaun Wade, he's been getting roasted pretty good by some of the NFL scouts that I know, and so this would be one way to kind of improve his stock, prove his stock again, make people take notice that he is still the same guy that people said he was before the season when they were talking about him as a possible top 10 pick, and now I have people telling me he's not going to be in the top 3 rounds, which I doubt a little bit, but I'm not a scout. But this would be an opportunity for him to kind of shut up quite a few people. And I asked John Mechie today, like, hey, can one guy contain Devontae Smith? And he said, no. And so, all right.
Okay,
we'll
bro.
The double no.
So. Yeah, the double no.
The dreaded double
Yes.
no.
Double negative. It means yes.
Oh, there you go.
No. I was looking at some numbers because I love numbers, and they don't necessarily always translate from one year to the other. But I'm looked at Alabama's 2020 numbers going into this game versus Alabama's 2014 numbers coming out of the Ohio State game. And Alabama, not surprisingly, every offensive major category except one is better in 2020 than 2014. The one that was better in 14 was rushing offense, and they averaged about 21 more yards per game. But when you look at total offense is up about 50 yards, passing offense is up about 75 yards. Team passing efficiency, which I don't have my slide rule to figure that out, that's almost 45 points better. Scoring offense is up about 12 points. I think the big secret here is going to be this Alabama defense isn't used to seeing. Every category in 2014 on the defensive side of the ball, until we get to turnover margin, favors 2014. The numbers aren't dramatically different, but I definitely, you pop in the Ole Miss game, you pop in the Florida game, I think you see some vulnerabilities, and I think the roadmap there is kind of what Ole Miss did. You just have to go slug for slug with them and just can't have your serve broken, and Ole Miss did. And then if Ohio State can stay even, can start running the ball, can start just trying to control the clock a little bit, you take your chances there at that point.
So, Kevin, it sounds like you would like to take up this task for me. I'm reviewing bowl results for each conference over the last decade. So I'm like breaking down record against the Power 5, the Group of 5, as ranked teams against not ranked teams, as not ranked teams against ranked teams, record as the higher ranked team, the lower ranked team, trying to give a little perspective on all this. Point differentials against the Big 10, the Big 12, against all the other conferences, et cetera, against top 5 teams, top 10 teams. Yeah, just starting that little project.
Yeah, I'll leave that one to you. That sounds like a lot of work.
Mark, I can tell you the SEC is undefeated in bowl games that they care about.
I did pick up on that recently because I was given this idea, not that I haven't done stuff like this before, but there was a tweet out there that had bowl records in the last decade. somebody actually made that comment because the SEC was whatever 68-39. Well, the SEC was 68-0 when they cared, and the other 39 they didn't care.
Yep.
Yeah, it's easy to figure out. I can just throw all this away then.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Tony. The other thing you gave us, a little nugget today that I responded to, was that Mac Jones said this Ohio State defense is the best defense that Bama's faced this year. Texas A&M, Georgia. How about that?
I've got some numbers there too. I'm looking for them.
Good for them. I think that Ohio State and the fans at Ohio State don't know how to react when an opponent, gives them credit after the crappy way that Clemson kind of wiped its feet on Ohio State here last week. They don't know how to react when there's common courtesy and common decency. I sent Tony and Kevin some of the messages from our message board, and you're right. The Ohio State win over Clemson was a unifying and rallying point. We had messages that were brought to our message board from South Carolina, who is their number one rival, in state. Then the Florida State site, who's one of their big ACC rivals, and even the Michigan State site, which has a very robust message board on our 24/7. I don't know if anybody looked at Michigan to see what they were saying, but some of the messages were extremely humorous. In fact, one of the South Carolina people wrote, "This is like watching South Carolina play." Like they were so into it, they adopted Ohio State as their team this year to thump Clemson. So it was nice to know that the whole world had rallied around Ohio State to put Clemson in their place. And I think that we need more of that all for one and one for all type feeling in college football. And is there a bigger Darth Vader figure, in college football than Nick Saban, I suppose, in Alabama? They're like General Motors. They just every year they just churn it out one after another. And what he's done in 14 years there, what is it, 5 or 6 national championships? He may have 6 total and 5 at Alabama or something like that. Has been nothing short of amazing. But this is a drought for them. I don't think they've won one since 2017. Maybe is it they haven't been they haven't won one since 2017. So 3 years, that's just a tremendous drought for Alabama. So we'll see if they can turn back these upstart Buckeyes this Monday.
And for 34 cents a day, you too can sponsor an Alabama fan who's just yearning for another national championship. I have some of the numbers here just in terms of statistics, which, again, if anything, the numbers this year mean even less because you're only playing within your conference or whatnot, so you just really don't know. Ohio State has the national number 2 rush defense, but Alabama did play number 1, which was UGA, averaging about 17 yards less. Ohio State, for as much maligned as the pass defense is one of the better pass efficiency defenses that Alabama will play. Ohio State's 57th. Alabama's played 4 teams that have been better, but most of them are in the 50s. The only one that's above that, Notre Dame, was 34th. And then Ohio State's scoring defense only allowing 22 points a game. As I do a quick look here, who is it? UGA was out allowing 20 points a game, Notre Dame 19.7, so that's all pretty comparable. So from a statistical standpoint, when you have a player coming out and saying this is the best defense they've faced in terms of 4 stars, 5 stars mixed with results, it's pretty true. I mean, maybe not across the board, but, the numbers are comparable. And, we're just going to get to see what it means from who Ohio State played, because Ohio State didn't necessarily face a great rusher. And, I guess ultimately it did face a great passer in Michael Penix, and then certainly in Trevor Lawrence. But, which numbers are going to hold true longer.
Valdis and Justin Firm, thank you so much for the Super Chat contributions. As Valdis says here, please hit the like button,
guys,
that thumbs up.
Guys, I'm just breaking in here, and I know that we're witnessing some interesting things happening here. I'm on CBS, and there are protesters at the Capitol building, and they are squaring off with the police and the This is
Oh boy.
pretty interesting times we're seeing in Washington, D.C. I just throw that in there just because we're on here live right now, and I'm not trying to be political or back either side or anything, but they are spraying people, and it's getting a little dicey there in the nation's capital. They're evacuating some of the federal buildings and stuff. So here they're going to some of they've got rioters out or people out here moving the barricades. It's getting a little ugly down there. They're on the steps of the Capitol building, and they are challenging the police, and it's getting a little ugly.
All this over an 8-team playoff?
Yeah, we want to go to 18. Yep.
I'm just trying to bring us back to hashtag stick to sports, or as they say on Cobra Kai, hash brown and stick to sports.
18 still ain't getting Georgia in.
A little levity never hurts. Yep.
Oh, an 8 or a 16. Yes, the fight is on, the confrontation. Oh my goodness. Yes. We've known, I guess, for a little while that January 6th would be a day of reckoning of sorts. But Valdez, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution and reminding everyone to please hit the like button. And we remind everyone out there that Ohio State Buckeyes Live is basically brought to you by you. So your individual contributions and your contacts with sponsors that you could please bring to me, MarkRogersTV at Gmail, would certainly be welcome. Alabama, I don't know if you guys noticed this. They had slightly more of an easier time against Notre Dame in the first game. Certainly there being an 11-day or 10.5-day resting period of sorts between games helps. But Ohio State seemed to have exhausted itself a little bit more than Alabama. And in addition to the physical beating that we saw Justin Fields take, but the entire team, his was kind of a symbolic beating to a certain extent, in just thinking about everything that was put into this game, this Clemson win, of whether this has exhausted this team or could have some ill effects mentally and physically. Tony?
I think there is some possibility there based on how much they were looking at Clemson from the get-go since last year. They could possibly have exerted themselves emotionally and physically, but then you do have time to recover, and it is not just a 1 week and then it's time to play. So they do have some time there, and then with that time comes the realization that this is the actual goal from the outset. It wasn't Clemson. They wanted Clemson, and they're happy to get Clemson. But the actual final goal, the big boss at the end, is a national title. And Ryan Day has said all along he just wants his team to have something to show for everything they've gone through. I think they already have that. But if you want everything to show, like if you want it all, there is that opportunity. And it would be hard for me to believe a coach or a program that is designed on winning national championships or designed with that intent would get to that point and then, not have the emotions to be able to get through it. Physically, they may not be able to. Like that may be what cost them, be it Justin Fields, be it the coronavirus. That may be what impacts them greater than just, like they've spared all of their emotional expense against Clemson. I think they can get right back up for Alabama. But physically, I think there could be some issues.
One of the things I think about is these opportunities only come around once in a lifetime, once in a player's stint at a college. I mean, obviously Clemson and Alabama have been playing for it every year, it seems like, for the last 5 years. But, Ohio State, this is their first time in there with this collection of players. None of these players have ever played in a national championship game. Ohio State did play in 2 of them back-to-back in 6 and 7 against Florida and LSU prior to that. And a few of those guys on the team in 2006 would have been true freshmen in 2002 when they played Miami, but probably didn't play any kind of an on-field role as redshirts more than likely in 2002. So you only get one typically you only get one bite at this apple, and you want to take advantage of it when you do. And they certainly did that in 2002 with Miami. They came up with the plan. They out-executed Miami. They out-physicaled Miami, outplayed them, and won that game. And certainly, having to win the 2 games in 2015, beating Alabama, which you thought, wow, they just scaled the biggest mountain that's out there. And Oregon was almost an anticlimax after that. That's not necessarily the case this time, because Alabama is number 1. Obviously, they're undefeated, whereas Clemson had lost the game previously and had a few holes in kind of their resume, which Ohio State was able to take advantage of. So I'm interested again. You want to come away from this knowing you gave it everything that you have. In 2006, when they lost to Florida, they didn't give themselves a proper chance to beat Florida. I don't know if they overlooked Florida or what the situation was. That certainly won't be the case this time. Ohio State's not going to overlook Alabama, but they didn't take Florida seriously, and Florida, as the underdog, came in and just leveled them. Then the following year, it was all basically self-inflicted. They had, I want to say, 3 turnovers. They gave up 5 sacks, and there were 5 15-yard personal foul penalties in that game for Ohio State, including a roughing the punter when they were getting the ball back with a chance to tie the game down 7. Instead, LSU got the ball and retained it and went down and made it 14, and the game was over. So you want to come away from this game with no regrets, that you gave it everything that you possibly had to win the national championship. And if you're able to do that, you, as we said, you etch your name in Ohio State football immortality and college football immortality. And then the joke is you'll never pay for a beer ever again in Columbus, Ohio, which, I think for a lot of the guys is probably pretty true. If they're big beer drinkers, they get a lot of free beer out there. So, it depends how big of a beer drinker are you. Does this really mean something to you? So at any rate, I'm just joking, of course, but I am of a mind that this team's going to take as much advantage of this opportunity as they can. I am of a mind that they're going to be in this game in the fourth quarter, and then it could just come down to one bounce or one whatever that puts them over the top.
While everyone is logging into their favorite wagering site, getting ready to take these predictions straight to the bank, I will remind everyone that we're here every week, Wednesday afternoon, with these 3, and they have a ton of sports, not just football, to cover on a daily basis. They give over an hour of their time here every week. And again, my channel runs on your individual contributions and on sponsorships. So I've been pleased to be contacted by a few people that at least had some ties to sponsorship. So if you yourself own a business that could benefit from sponsoring our show, our channel, but specifically this show, Ohio State Buckeyes Live, each and every week, please contact me at MarkRogersTV@gmail. And certainly your individual contributions are welcome. Just realize the expertise, the knowledge, the insight, everything that's brought here each and every week by Steve Hellwagon, Kevin Noon, and Tony Gerdeman. And Kevin picked last week, so he needs to again pick this week first. No, I guess we'll be.
I'll go. I don't care. I've been sitting here kind of working on it. I skipped out on the last whip arounds as I was sitting here thinking about my pick. I went back to the 2014 Alabama game, thinking that was the last time I picked against Ohio State. And as I think I said on the show last week, when you're covering a team that doesn't lose all that much, if you just pick Ohio State, you're going to be right a hell of a lot more than you're going to be wrong. I picked Ohio State to win that game. So maybe I was seeing with clouded eyes or just fear of the message board turning on itself and me having to step in the middle of all of that. I've watched the Alabama Ole Miss game a couple times as kind of a blueprint, and how Ole Miss was able really for much of the game to just hang with Alabama and just went slug for slug, and it just came down to who was going to be able to get a stop and who wasn't. And we may say all these things about this Alabama defense being much more mortal than it is year in and year out. The Ole Miss defense, putrid, horrible, and they eventually broke. We have a lot of people saying things about the Ohio State defense this year. Yeah, the Buckeyes gave up 400 yards to Clemson via the pass, only 44 on the ground, took Trevor Lawrence out of the game, more or less as a runner. I like Ohio State's offensive ability to be able to go slug for slug. Why not? Ohio State, 52, Alabama, 49.
Wow.
Barn burner.
That's great. Yeah, the over-under is like 77, 78, so they're thinking something on the lines of 42-35 Alabama, the odds makers. Alabama is now up to an 8-point favorite, where if you can get it over 7 points, I think, the obvious play to me is Ohio State plus the points. And that's if all things are equal. That's if Ohio State's relatively healthy, if Justin Fields is able to run even a little bit, able to throw without limitation. He had the thumb injury coming into the game, and that wasn't a problem. I watched him in warmups, and he hit one 50-yard pass after another to the guys going down the sideline against air. And then he took it over into the game where, again, it was basically like they were against air. So, because Clemson was always 5 yards behind the play. So, I don't know if that's going to be the case with Patrick Surtain and Alabama's secondary, although they were something in the 70s, I think, in passing yards allowed this season. Again, some of that could be a function of the fact that Alabama's offense had people down 24-0, 31-0. And at that point, it doesn't do you any good to run the football. So for 3/4 of the game, all people did against Alabama was throw the football. So you don't know how skewed those numbers are. We do know that Ole Miss and Florida both threw for about 400 yards against Alabama in competitive one-score games. As they turned out, I think Ole Miss scored a touchdown in the final minute to make it one score, but, competitive games. So I think if Fields is healthy, he's going to have a big day. Olave and Wilson are going to have a big day. Keep going to the tight end. That was huge. And, let's test Alabama's run defense and just see what you've got, because you've got a veteran offensive line. It would seem to me that Matthew Jones is probably going to play again. I can't imagine that Harry Miller on 10 days is going to be fully healthy coming back from COVID to play, or if he's even eligible to play based on when his test may have been. It just seems to be that maybe they would split time, or that Matthew Jones is going to play again at guard and line up and run and open some of those holes like they did against Clemson and see what happens. Trey Sermon was a beast. And my daughter and I were sitting here watching one segment of the game on the Big 10 and 60 where it was just boom, 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 boom. And he's carrying 3 and 4 guys with him on every play. He's getting hit 2 or 3 yards downfield and falling forward for 8 yards. And is he going to be able to do that against Alabama? I don't know. I doubt it. But I saw a lot of great indications in that game that this team is there for the long haul. 639 yards against Clemson, can they get in the 400s even against Alabama? Probably. So, that may be enough. Kevin said, 52-49? Yeah. I was just sitting here saying something like 41-38, something like that. I rarely, if ever, pick against Ohio State. I'll probably pick Ohio State. The only thing that's got me worried or questioning this is Justin Fields' health and the number of players Ohio State's without in terms of COVID. Because if Togiai and Tyreek Smith can't play, they've been difference makers the last 2 games. Togiai really all season. If they can't play, then that takes a 2/11 of your best 11 starters on defense would be out, and some other guys are going to have to step up and match their level of play. So put me down for 41-38 and check back on Bucknuts in a day or two to see if that's Ohio State or Alabama. But it's going to be high scoring. I certainly would advocate plus the 8. I'm ambivalent on the over-under. I mean, it could end up at 75 if you don't get paid and still be considered a high-scoring game. So, maybe somebody will mix a stop in there somewhere. But those are my thoughts right now. I'm probably leaning toward Ohio State, but I just want to know a little bit more before I certify it.
Mark, I'll be brief because we've got OSU Zooms at 2:45, and I still have to make some lunch. So, knowing that I am not, anytime I've picked Ohio State in a playoff game, it hasn't gone well. Every time I have picked against Ohio State, it has gone well for the Buckeyes. So let's keep that in mind as I talk. I do think that whoever's missing defensively for the Buckeyes, there are only so many possessions in a game for Alabama, especially when Ohio State's offense is also moving down the field and scoring. So I think Ohio State's offense mitigates some of that defensive loss if we assume that most of those drives end up in touchdowns regardless. And so I do expect a shootout. I'm going to go 45. Gosh dang it, Mark. Why do you put that there? I'm going to go Alabama 45, 42, field goal at the end. Ohio State does not have the ability right now to kick field goals. Blake Hobbiel is a little tweaked, and so maybe they don't take that shot at the end when they can, and then they get stuffed on the fourth down. Alabama moves down for one last 55-yarder, and that's what gets the job done for Alabama. I do think it's going to be close. Any guys missing, I think, like I said, gets mitigated by Ohio State's offense being able to score, run the ball, throw the ball. There's only so many points that can be scored, and Ohio State's going to score a bunch of them, and I think Alabama will as well.
There you have it, everyone. Ohio State Buckeyes live each and every week, and this, of course, is a special edition, and appreciate these guys. They cover football. They cover basketball. Please check out their sites. It's Tony Gerdeman next to me. Buckeye Scoop was getting all sorts of accolades in the comments section early in the hour. Kevin Noon below me from Rivals Buckeye Grove. Steve Hellwagon, appreciate him and him posting these videos. Check him out and the rest of the staff at Bucknuts 247 Sports. These guys are the best. This show is phenomenal, and I just introduce it and then let them roll, and they do all the hard work and provide all the insight. But regardless of that, still hang with the channel here because we've got some other decent shows on as well. Guys, we appreciate it. Enjoy the game. Hopefully we'll see you back here with a national championship next week.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care.